The spotlights burned bright against the polished studio floor as the audience waited with anticipation. The set of The Truth with Marcus Bennett gleamed with its signature blue and silver decor, cameras positioned strategically to capture every reaction, every subtle shift in expression. This wasn't just another celebrity interview. Keanu Reeves was tonight's guest, and tickets had sold out within minutes of the announcement. If you've been watching this video, comment below where you're watching from. We love seeing our global family connect through these powerful stories. Marcus Bennett adjusted his designer tie, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth as he reviewed his notes. Known as Hollywood's Hammer, Marcus had built his career by breaking celebrities down to their most vulnerable state. His ratings soared with each tearful confession, each moment of discomfort he extracted from his guests. Tonight would be no different. Perhaps even career-defining. The audience murmured excitedly as the stage manager counted down. 5, 4, 3. The last numbers were silent, a finger pointing, then dropping as the cameras began to roll. "Welcome to The Truth," Marcus's voice boomed across the studio. "I'm your host, Marcus Bennett, and tonight we have a very special guest." His eyes gleamed with predatory anticipation. You know him from blockbuster films like The Matrix, John Wick, and Speed. Please welcome to the stage Keanu Reeves. The audience erupted in thunderous applause as Keanu walked onto the stage. He moved with an effortless grace that seemed at odds with his imposing height. Dressed in a simple black suit with no tie, his shoulder-length hair framing a face that had aged like fine wine, Keanu radiated a quiet dignity. He offered a gentle wave to the audience, a humble smile gracing his lips as he settled into the guest chair. "Keanu, welcome to the show." Marcus extended his hand, his grip noticeably tight as they shook, a small power play that didn't escape the notice of those who knew his tactics. "Thank you for having me, Marcus," Keanu replied, his voice warm yet measured. Marcus leaned back in his chair, crossing one leg over the other. "So, Keanu, your new film is breaking box office records. Another action hit in a career full of them." He paused, his expression shifting slightly. "But let's not talk about the movies everyone's seen. Let's talk about what they don't see." A slight tension rippled through the audience. This was Marcus's signature move, bypassing the expected promotional questions and diving straight into personal territory. "You've been in Hollywood for decades now," Marcus continued. "Yet you ride the subway, you give up your seat to strangers, you donate millions anonymously." His tone shifted, a subtle note of mockery entering his voice. "Is this all just an elaborate PR stunt? Because let's be honest, no one in Hollywood is actually that nice." A murmur went through the audience. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others leaned forward, eager for the drama to unfold. Keanu remained still, his eyes fixed on Marcus. He took a moment before responding, a moment that seemed to stretch across the studio. "Have you ever watched people, Marcus?" Keanu finally asked, his voice gentle but clear. "I mean really watched them. On the subway, in cafes, walking down the street." Marcus blinked, clearly not expecting this response. "I'm not sure what—" "There's a woman who takes the same subway I sometimes ride," Keanu continued, undeterred. "Every day she carries a worn backpack full of books. She reads to children at hospitals. No cameras, no recognition, just genuine kindness." He paused. "I'm not special, Marcus. I'm just fortunate enough to have a platform where people notice my actions." The studio fell silent. Marcus quickly regrouped, shuffling his note cards with practiced nonchalance. "That's a lovely sentiment, Keanu, but come on. Hollywood changed you. It must have. The fame, the fortune. You expect us to believe none of that affected you?" Keanu smiled slightly. "Of course it affected me. Every experience shapes us. But it didn't define me." Marcus, sensing his angle wasn't landing, decided to strike harder. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a more intimate level. "Let's talk about loss, Keanu. You've experienced more than your fair share. The atmosphere in the studio immediately tensed. Everyone knew about the tragedies in Keanu's life. His stillborn daughter, the death of his girlfriend Jennifer Syme in a car accident, his sister's battle with leukemia, his troubled childhood. Your daughter, your girlfriend, your sister's illness, with all that pain, how do you not become bitter? Or is this nice guy act just a wall you've built to keep the world at a distance? A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Even for Marcus, this was crossing a line. A woman in the second row covered her mouth in shock. The camera operators exchanged glances of discomfort. Keanu's expression remained calm, but something shifted in his eyes. Not anger, but a depth of feeling that seemed to fill the entire studio. He took a slow, deliberate breath before speaking. Pain isn't something you overcome, Marcus. It's something you carry. His voice was quiet, but reached every corner of the now silent studio. The weight of it changes over time. Sometimes it's heavier, sometimes lighter, but it's always there. And that's okay. He paused, his gaze drifting slightly as if looking at something beyond the studio walls. When someone you love becomes a memory, that memory becomes a treasure. I'm not bitter because bitterness would dishonor those treasures. A woman in the front row wiped a tear from her cheek. Marcus, for perhaps the first time in his broadcasting career, seemed at a loss for words, but only momentarily. Clearing his throat, he pressed on. That's very poetic, Keanu. But let's be real. You're worth hundreds of millions of dollars. You could live like a king, yet you choose not to. Most people would call that bizarre, maybe even wasteful. Keanu tilted his head slightly, considering the question. Have you ever watched the sunrise, Marcus? What does that have to do with? The most beautiful things in life are free, Keanu said. Compassion, kindness, connection. Money is just a tool. It can solve some problems, create comfort, provide security, but it can't give meaning to life. Marcus scoffed. Easy to say when you have so much of it. Perhaps, Keanu conceded with a nod. But I've had times with less, and times with more. The times I remember most fondly aren't defined by what I owned, but by who I connected with, what I learned, how I grew. Marcus shuffled his cards again, his confidence visibly wavering. This interview wasn't following the script he'd envisioned. Instead of exposing vulnerabilities to exploit, each question seemed to reveal more depth to his guest than he'd anticipated. You're in your 50s now, Keanu, Marcus pivoted, his voice regaining some of its earlier edge. Hollywood isn't kind to aging stars. Aren't you worried about becoming irrelevant? The next generation of action heroes is already here. A few audience members shook their heads, uncomfortable with the blatant ageism. Keanu, however, smiled, a genuine, warm smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Relevance is an interesting concept, he mused. What does it mean to be relevant? To have your name trending on social media? To have your face on magazine covers? He shifted in his chair, leaning forward slightly. I think true relevance comes from impact. Does your presence make someone's day better? Does your work inspire someone to think differently, to feel deeply, to create something new? That kind of relevance doesn't have an expiration date. The studio was completely silent now. Even the production staff stood motionless, captivated. But yes, I am aging, Keanu continued, a hint of amusement in his voice. We all are, from the moment we're born. It's not something to fear. It's something to honor. Each line on my face represents a laugh I've shared, a lesson I've learned, a moment I've lived fully. A spontaneous burst of applause erupted from the audience. Marcus tried to regain control with a raised hand, but the applause continued for several seconds. When it finally quieted, Marcus's expression had hardened. This interview was slipping away from him, and he knew it. It was time for his final move, the question he reserved for when he needed to truly shake a guest. "Keanu," he said, his voice now cold and clinical, "you've achieved everything a person could want. Fame, fortune, critical acclaim. But in the end, we all die alone. When your time comes, when the lights fade and the cameras stop rolling, what will it all have meant? In 100 years, who will remember Keanu Reeves?" The question hung in the air like a physical presence. This was Marcus's specialty, the existential strike designed to force celebrities to confront their ultimate insignificance, their fleeting impact on a world that would eventually forget them. Keanu didn't answer immediately. He looked down at his hands for a moment, then out toward the audience, making brief eye contact with several people in the front rows. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, yet somehow filled the entire room. "You know, Marcus, I don't think that's the right question." Marcus frowned. "What do you mean?" "The question isn't, who will remember me? The question is, how did I make others feel while I was here?" He shifted in his seat, his posture straightening slightly. "I believe we're all connected. Every person, every living thing. What we do creates ripples. A small kindness might seem insignificant, but it changes something. Maybe it gives someone hope on their darkest day. Maybe they carry that forward and show kindness to someone else." He gestured with his hands, a subtle movement that emphasized his words. "I don't need to be remembered by name or face. But if something I did, a film that moved someone, a conversation that mattered, even just giving up my subway seat, if any of that added more light than darkness to the world, then my time here had meaning." A tear slipped down the cheek of a cameraman. A production assistant stood motionless, her clipboard forgotten in her hands. "We're all temporary, Marcus. That's what makes life precious. It's not about leaving a mark that lasts forever. It's about how we touch the lives around us right now, in this moment." Marcus Bennett, the man known for reducing celebrities to tears, for extracting confessions and creating viral moments of vulnerability, sat completely still. For perhaps the first time in his professional life, he was utterly speechless. In the silence that followed, something extraordinary happened. A woman in the third row stood up, then a man near the back. Within moments, the entire audience was on their feet, applauding not just with their hands but with their hearts. The sound filled the studio, washing over the stage in waves of genuine appreciation. Marcus glanced at his producer, who was signaling frantically that they needed to go to commercial. But Marcus didn't move. He couldn't. Something had shifted inside him, a crack in the armor he'd built over years of cynical interviews and manufactured drama. He began, then stopped, his voice uncharacteristically unsteady. "I don't know what to say." Keanu reached across the space between them and placed his hand gently on Marcus's arm, a gesture of such simple humanity that it seemed to break through completely. "You don't have to say anything," Keanu replied softly. "Just feel." The director, sensing a moment of genuine television magic, signaled the camera operators to keep rolling despite the producer's protests. Marcus Bennett, Hollywood's most feared interviewer, looked down at Keanu's hand on his arm, then back up to meet his eyes. "How do you do it?" he asked, his carefully constructed persona falling away completely. "How do you stay so human?" Keanu smiled, and in that smile was decades of lived experience, joy and sorrow, triumph and loss, all carried with a grace that couldn't be taught or bought. "By remembering that's all any of us are," he answered, "just humans, trying our best on a challenging journey." The studio remained standing, many openly weeping now. The cameras captured it all, not the manufactured drama Marcus had planned, but something far more valuable. A moment of genuine connection, of truth that transcended entertainment. As the director finally signaled for the commercial break, Marcus didn't deliver his usual sign-off. Instead, he simply nodded to Keanu, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. The lights dimmed, The on-air signs flickered off, but no one moved. The spell that had been cast remained unbroken. Later, as Keanu prepared to leave, a production assistant approached him with tears still drying on her face. "Mr. Reeves," she said hesitantly, "I just wanted to thank you. My mother is fighting cancer, and I've been so angry, so lost. But what you said about pain, about carrying it, it helped. It really helped." Keanu listened intently, giving her his full attention despite the bustle of the post-show activity around them. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Sarah," she replied. "Sarah, I'm sorry about your mother. That anger you feel, it's valid. It's part of loving deeply. But remember that love is what remains when everything else falls away." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small notebook. He wrote something quickly, tore out the page, and handed it to her. "This is my personal email. When you're ready, let me know how I can help." Sometimes just having someone to listen makes the journey a little lighter. Sarah stared at the paper in disbelief, her hands trembling slightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what to say." Keanu smiled that same warm smile that had captivated the audience. Sometimes the most honest response isn't words at all. As he finally left the studio, slipping out a side door to avoid the gathered fans and paparazzi, Marcus Bennett stood alone on the now empty stage. The lights were dim, the cameras silent. He held his note cards in his hand, staring at questions he'd prepared to ambush his guest. Questions that now seemed not just petty, but empty. For years Marcus had convinced himself that revealing celebrities' vulnerabilities was a public service, that stripping away their carefully constructed images was a form of truth-telling. But tonight he'd encountered a different kind of truth, one that had nothing to do with exposing weakness and everything to do with embracing humanity. He slowly tore the cards in half, letting the pieces fall to the floor. Tomorrow, the internet would be ablaze with clips from the interview. His producers would celebrate the ratings boost. Memes would circulate of his speechless expression. But none of that mattered right now, because for the first time in longer than he could remember, Marcus Bennett was asking himself not, "What will they say about this interview?" but, "What will I remember about myself?" And in that question, in Keanu's gentle reframing of what truly matters, was the beginning of something new. The following morning, as predicted, clips from the interview went viral. Keanu Reeves silences arrogant host with profound wisdom became the top trending topic. Comments flooded social media. "I've never seen Marcus Bennett speechless before. Keanu is a national treasure. Watching this made me call my mum for the first time in years. Thank you, Keanu. I was ready to hate watch this, but I ended up crying instead. His words about pain being something we carry, I needed that." But perhaps the most surprising development came 3 days later, when Marcus Bennett opened his show with an unprecedented statement. "Good evening. Before we begin tonight's show, I want to talk about authenticity. For years I've prided myself on getting to the truth behind celebrity personas. But after my recent interview with Keanu Reeves, I've been reflecting on what truth really means." He paused, visibly emotional, something his regular viewers had never witnessed. Sometimes the most important truths aren't the ones we expose in others, but the ones we discover in ourselves. Moving forward, this show will still seek truth, but with empathy, with kindness, with the understanding that every person sitting in that chair has a journey as complex and valuable as our own. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Letters and emails poured in from viewers, sharing how Keanu's words, and now Marcus's transformation, had impacted them. People spoke of making amends with estranged family members, of finding peace with grief they'd been carrying, of small acts of kindness inspired by what they'd witnessed. And somewhere in the city, Keanu Reeves sat in a small cafe, reading a book, occasionally looking up to watch people passing by, each with their own stories, their own struggles, their own moments of beauty. He didn't know about the ripple effects of his words. He didn't need to. He simply lived by them, one moment at a time, adding more light than darkness to a world that desperately needed it. If you were touched by this story, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming true stories. And share in the comments, what will people remember about you?